Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to another edition of Noles Anonymous. I'm your host, Drake, and today in the stream yard, as always, I got my co-host, Mr. Davey Wise Esquire. David, ¿qué pasa, mi amigo?
Drake, I'd like to say it was a stress-free college football day yesterday. In some ways it was, in some ways it was not. Like to Can't wait to get back to normal Saturday games.
I wish I could say the same thing, but my hard rock bag count can probably say the opposite of that. But that's what we're talking about here, folks. Talking about kind of how I think we all as a collective fan base should feel after watching other teams go through their week one, whether they were lollygagging, caught asleep, or simply some teams just did not show up. And then also talk about the Boston College game that will be happening later tonight as Boston College travels to Doak Campbell behind Thomas Castellanos, Treshaun Ward, and hopefully FSU can kind of rebound from the loss over in Dublin against GT. So, but Dave, when it comes to the college football landscape as a whole, we were talking about it earlier, like pre-show. You felt, or we felt, kind of like how, man, everyone just seems to just be struggling out the gate, and other people just seem like they were kind of sleepwalking through their week one. Don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. I want to caveat this right off rip just by saying this is not to make excuses for what happened against Georgia Tech. Not going to do it.
Can't do it. Won't do it.
Won't do it. But what I will say is, what the hell? Like, is anyone good this year? This feels like so far, small sample size. We'll get a much clearer picture as the season goes on, but as of right now, this year feels wide open. Oregon just looked awful against Idaho. Um, Virginia Tech just gets taken care of business by Vanderbilt, who is, I feel like, weren't they up 3 scores at one point? Just
Yeah, they were, I think it was 20-3 or something like that at one point. It did not look good for Virginia Tech, which a lot of people actually probably has as a dark horse to win the ACC, which
Pat McAfee picked for Virginia Tech to
well,
win
Pat
the
McAfee
ACC.
also picked West Virginia to beat Penn State, and we all know how that happened too,
Yes,
so
we sure do. But yeah, I mean, look, if you go down the teams on our schedule, like Notre Dame took care of business against Texas A&M, pulled away late. Exactly what I thought would happen, but Texas A&M is in full rebuild mode right now, and Notre Dame still got challenged by them. There's a lot of talent on that A&M team, but still took them to the wire. Florida, I don't know that they're going to finish their season. They may just do like a gentleman's agreement that, okay, you guys win. So not scared to play them at all. Clemson just got their teeth kicked in by Georgia. Obviously, Georgia's number one team in the country until they're not, but Clemson didn't look like they could do much of anything right on offense at all, which same as every year. Dabo hasn't made those changes, won't use the transfer portal. So look, Miami looked good. It's hard to tell how good they looked because they played against one of the worst teams that I've seen play this year or any year. In addition to just pure indifference on that Florida team, but Miami looked good. That's going to be a tough game, no doubt about it. I fully expect little Mario to ruin this somehow, some way, sooner or later. But yeah, that nobody else on our schedule this year gave me any fear watching those games yesterday.
yeah, I think right now my top 3 teams in no particular order, Georgia being clear number 1 because Georgia, that is that's like the Avengers times 10. Just each player bigger, stronger, faster than the next one.
Monstars.
Monstars, I think you said you texted that in the group chat, and that was, like, kind of an understatement from how much better they were on the
Walking off
football
the bus,
field.
they're just
It was ridiculous, and then you got Ohio State too, that
yeah,
they started off a little slow, but
Jeremiah
Jeremiah
Smith,
Smith,
man.
that kid's an elite talent. And then I know, I mean, yeah, you kinda have to take it with a little bit of a caveat that they did play Florida, but Miami also looks really damn good, especially with the way Cam Ward, if he's able to minimize those mistakes, which he did have one yesterday with the Shamar James pick, that was a great take by the Florida linebacker, but that team also is gonna be very good, so I'm interested to see how they play, not the next 2 weeks because I think they have some cupcakes beforehand, but definitely when they play Louisville, I'll be watching that game. But if you look at the teams overall, it just felt like a lot of people, I guess, and this is like you're saying, like you said before, not to make excuses, but it felt like no one came out really with their A game when it came to the favorites in a lot of these matchups, unless you were Georgia, Ohio State, Miami, and also I don't know if you saw Ole Miss. They had like 59 points at half. I mean, I know they're playing Furman, but I think Jackson Dart was like 11 to 13 for
Yeah.
300 yards and like 5 passing TDs in the one half. I'm like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do to a
Yeah.
to a team like Furman. But it goes to show kind of how week one we can't do what's the word I'm looking for, the cast you can't catastrophize everything, after 1 week, but definitely only a few teams showed out yesterday.
Yeah, it made us feel better because, we obviously look sloppy and disorganized, and it makes you wonder if this is something you're going to see more of in college football. Like, it used to be the case that it was only high school recruits on your team who would stay there for, years and then transfer or graduate or whatever, or the NFL. But that meant continuity. That meant guys coming back with familiarity with the scheme with each other. With all this transfer portal action, all these guys getting plugged and placed in the starting lineups, it just makes you wonder if you're going to start seeing teams that rely on transfer players just look sloppy to start a lot of years because you're still learning communication and new systems and new coaches and new teammates. So again, maybe that has something to do with what you saw week one for us or week zero for us, because we obviously have a lot of transfers we're relying on this team. But yeah, the level of similarity I saw with a lot of supposedly elite teams, Oregon being the one that stood out most to me, uh, a lot of head scratchers, and head scratching with other teams makes me scratch my head less about ours and say maybe that is just a symptom of the era we're in.
I about to say maybe it kind of goes like we pump the brakes a little bit and stop giving out, I guess, kind of like the sky is falling takes when it's only week one when September isn't even started yet.
Well,
Maybe
and
that's
in the
kind of
college
what we
football
hear.
playoff era, where it doesn't matter if you lose a game anymore, apparently.
Oh, that got me thinking. Like, do you think teams are kind of going to be going into each game differently now that they no longer have the boogeyman of one loss being and then you're just out of it for the rest of the picture? Because now you have those automatic bids if you win your conference, and then the rest of the ranking goes by itself.
Yes and
I,
no.
I don't I don't think so, but like I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
So before the season, I forgot who published this list on Twitter. It was a list of how many teams could afford one or more losses and how many losses each team that could afford a loss could afford. And
Mhm.
Florida State was there with Clemson and I think it was Alabama that we could afford a loss, like just we could afford an inexplicable loss. And Georgia, I think they said I think it said 2 or 3, which feels about right at this point. But
If they lose that many games, to be honest with you.
point being, not only do you still make the playoff if you win your conference, you actually guarantee a top 4 seed and a bye week the first week of the playoff by winning your conference. So, yeah, I mean, the conference this year doesn't look very great so far. So, if you're a two-loss team in the conference championship game, you take care of business and suddenly you're a top 4 seed in the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, with that margin for error, I do wonder if it causes the coaches or causes our or other coaches to call plays or games differently, knowing that they can afford that loss. But look, we lost that luxury already. So you have to take care of business every week. Do I think that could have an effect on things down the road, like in subsequent years? Yeah, absolutely. I think less so with a guy like Mike Norvell, who all he cares about is winning every game every week. I don't think he plays that game of, we could afford it anyways.
No, but I definitely think that some coaches would be like, okay, that's kind of like we're able to not lose the game. I don't think any coach is obviously going to say that. I mean, it's more like, hey, we can try to be a little more cutesy here and try to see like
Right.
plug and play which players there still. We were having a battle in training camps or during summer over summer and say, okay, maybe this player will plug and play, see if how they respond in game
Sure.
here. So I think we'll see a lot more of that.
Yep.
But Dave, let's turn the page on that and actually focus on the task at hand. That is the Boston College Eagles behind your boy Thomas Castellanos heading over to Doak Campbell Stadium.
Yeah.
7:30 kick, nighttime, the home opener. Dave, first off, are you going to the game?
I'm not going to that game.
Folks, please in the comments below, let Dave know why he is a
Yeah.
traitor. He should be going to the game. He should support this team through rain, shine, light, dark. But hey, Dave, you mainly watched this game last season. I was out doing a wedding tasting for my wedding,
Yep.
and you kept telling me like, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" So, Dave, I know you're looking up at the box score from last year.
Yeah.
Can you please paint a picture or give a recap to the listeners what happened last season, the last time these two teams faced off?
Sure can. So last time we played Boston College, we we snuck out of there with a win, and we snuck out of there with a win with our entire complement of players that completed an undefeated regular season and AC championship. The only reason that game was close was you already mentioned him, Thomas Castellanos. We used to make a joke on here when we started doing this podcast, like what, 5, 6 years ago now, whatever it was. We used to make a joke on here that when we played quarterbacks, we started their Heisman campaign. We played Boston College awful late in the year, so we didn't start Thomas Castellanos' Heisman campaign. Plus, they lost a lot of games. But Thomas Castellanos did a number on us. Let me read this to you. He went 20 for 33 for 305 passing yards and a touchdown with a QBR of 90.9, higher than Jordan Travis's in that game. Also rushed 16 times for 95 yards and a touchdown. And that doesn't even include the 64 yards they got from Robichaud. So, and now they add Treshaun Ward. That's going to be a problem for us, Drake. It seems like every time we play a quarterback like that, whether it's an overtly fast quarterback like Thomas Castellanos or a slower but competent runner like Garrett Schrader.
That man haunts my dreams, by the way, Garrett Schrader.
Yeah.
That man just he knows how to run. He knows how to run.
It looks awkward when he's running, but damn it if it isn't effective, especially when he's playing Florida State. Boston College is also in a rebuild right now. They just hired new coach Bill O'Brien. I know sounds like from what you've had to say about it, you're a fan of that hire.
I mean, I thought he was decent over Alabama, but also like I thought he was decent in the NFL, decent at Penn State.
Right.
I think he's actually a pretty good person to be actually at Boston College, help build it back up because he did help do that at Penn State. And I'll just be interested to see how he utilizes not only Castellanos but the weapons around him. So I think it'll be interesting from an offensive standpoint.
But what I would expect him to bring to that program, if nothing else, is just competent discipline of where you're supposed to be on the field, spending that much time in the Patriot system and in the NFL. I would expect him to instill a pretty firm grasp of doing the easy things right. And, when you're doing the easy things right, you're not making mistakes. And you have an electric quarterback like Thomas Castellanos, who we all know can beat you on the ground, but against last year had his highest yards passing total of his career against us. So, look, I mean, obviously they have a dynamic quarterback. They're returning a team that wasn't very good last year. And they're not exactly expected to be very good this year. But you saw enough confusion on our defense against Georgia Tech, enough just being out of position, enough loafing, enough just making the wrong or bad read or play that you especially worry when their most important player at the most important position can beat you two different ways, and his whole game is designed to take advantage of you being out of position. So that is for sure a real concern in this game. Does it not worry you?
I mean, it does, but with the game for last season, because I remember correctly heading up in that game, we had a lot of players either out with the flu or a lot of them playing with the flu, and not your typical flu. It's the one where you definitely should not be running up and down chasing a player like Thomas Castellanos. So I kind of take that game last year with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I think I do agree with you because with the Georgia Tech game, I think more my concern was the passivity or the lack of instinct to kind of trigger downhill, whether it be your safeties or your linebackers. And that does worry me to an extent. However, I did watch Georgia Tech a little bit last night when they played Georgia State. That is an offensive line that you can tell they played, with one another in that unit for several years. That's a strong front. This defensive line, I think, and also we were watching the game ourselves. I think Farmer and D-Jack definitely probably are going to be able to get a little bit of penetration here. They have lost some along the offensive line. There are still some great players that they have, like Ozzie Trapillo, the offensive tackle, the returning senior. But to me, if we're able to keep Thomas Castellanos like in the pocket, as in like even behind the line, if we are able to just simply do that, and also having a Blake Nicholson or a Cam Riley kind of spying him and leaving him back there and having him forced to throw, I think that's kind of where you're going to have the advantage here. Because you're right, this Boston College team isn't poised to make a deep or big run in this conference. But also, I want this team to take them seriously because it felt like they didn't do that last week against GT.
Yeah. I'm not really worried about losing this game if I'm being completely honest with you. Maybe that's a mistake to not take our opponents every week seriously, regardless of what they were last year. But what they were last year was good enough to hang around with us.
Mhm.
And mostly just because of that one player. But regardless, yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to do right fundamentally in this game. Like if you go out there and you just play your game, you should win. You're a more talented team. You're a better team than Boston College. We are a better team. I'll say this. I don't care if it's controversial. We're a better team than Georgia Tech. You play that game 10 more times, we're going to win 7 or 8 of them, most likely.
Agreed.
And I didn't, I say that without the benefit of seeing how some of these issues play out, obviously. Like DJU isn't among those issues, by the way. But I got to see better blocking from our offensive line. I got to see our receivers getting separation. I got to see our defensive line acting like they're interested in getting to the quarterback or setting an edge or, not just trying one move and saying, didn't work, whatever. I got to see our linebackers exist and pretend to be linebackers. I got to see a safety halfway capable of replacing Akeem Dent. That's a lot of things to get cleaned up, and it's a lot of things to get cleaned up quickly. And they're obviously coming back from an international trip. That shouldn't affect them at this point. They've been back long enough, but that's still a lot of coaching you're having to do to correct some things that I don't think are just as easy as, hey, next time do this. Like that confusion in the linebacker group, just hitting each other and moving around like crazy in the, before every play, that doesn't get fixed, I don't think, overnight. So you're going to learn a lot about how much in that first game was a little fluky versus just mental mistake after mental mistake. And how much room there's going to be for this team to grow the rest of this year. And I'm not worried about that with DJU. I just want to say that again because I keep seeing the criticism and he had nothing to do with that loss.
I mean, I'm not gonna go that far, but I mean, you're right. I think a lot of stuff we're gonna be pointing out to. I don't think we'll see the best version of this team probably until the middle of October. I think a lot of stuff, especially with the defense, comes with tightening up, kind of playing, being able to communicate with the chemistry wise. Because like we said before, a lot of the players are transfers, and this is kind of like the double-edged sword of relying on transfers to fill some of these starting positions where they haven't basically gotten that chemistry together. And communication wise, like it takes a little bit of time. That's why I see a lot of people talking to each other. I saw that a lot against GT. But with the team at Boston College, I mean, this is a team that, like example, they're fine at receiver, but I think people forget that they did lose their season leading pass catcher from last season, Joseph Griffin from the portal. They did bring Kamar Morales, which folks, if you don't remember, that's the tight end from UNC. I think he had like 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns in that wild game, I think, against Mike Norvell in his first season. But this is an offense that outside of Castellanos and Treshaun Ward, like I know that's a lot. That's a 3-headed, dog of a rushing attack. That to me, still, if you're able to limit them to basically taking their shots, kind of have to let them beat you through the air. And this is a team I don't think BC is designed to do that. So, Dave, you're right. If the defensive line, can do their job, linebackers, do their assignment, secondary, pick up, where they leave off. I think this is a game that you should probably win by 10 to 13. I don't think you cover because I think you're still learning, and I think you might have a little bit of a hangover because you have had a week or so to dwell on that loss. BC not only has had the entire summer to play this game because this is their first game, but they also have the game tape from GT to work on. So they're not going to go down without a fight. So I know you said that I'm not worried about losing to them, neither am I. But definitely they have a lot more tape on you than you probably would like to show them.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing about that. That against Boston College last year, we just talked about problems with the defensive line that need to get worked out for us, right? I mean, we're talking about I cannot believe we're even having this conversation because we're talking about a defensive line that was expected to for sure be the best in our conference and probably be top 5, if not among the very best in the country. And, just not to pick on him, but like Pat Payton last year against Boston College had an equally bad game, according to PFF, as he did last week against Georgia Tech. So
He might have the flu. Listen, he might have the flu, man, last year. I'm not.
I hear you.
No,
Maybe.
Aside from Castellanos, I'm not taking a lot from that game from last year, honestly. I personally threw that game out.
Well, either way, he had a bad game against them last year for one reason or another. He had a bad game last week. It'd be great for a bounce back, obviously. I fully expect this defensive line to dominate every game. I don't care who they're playing. This is one of the most talented groups of defensive linemen in the country. And I expect that to, in retrospect, have been a fluke or I don't know, but something to that effect. And, if you go out against Boston College and you're flat again, and your defensive line is not getting any pressure on Castellanos, and your offensive line not holding up in pass protection for DJ, and because of that, the receivers aren't getting enough time to get separation. You're getting predictable, running the ball more. You're going to see much of the same you saw against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's a better team than Boston College is, top to bottom. But if you come out like that again, I know we were a fumble away from still beating Georgia Tech, which speaks to the talent level of this team still. But you're going to be in a very similar spot where you're worrying about the result at the end of that game. I don't expect that, but that's a real thing if you don't come out and put in the effort and look competent at the positions you're supposed to be.
I think it just goes down to do your job. I think that's kind of what this game kind of goes down to. And like we were saying earlier in the episode, week 1, maybe take everything with a grain of salt because it is the first week. But now you're in week 2 and you have a bye heading into for next week. It'd be a lot better if this team kind of showed up and showed out, took care of business against BC, and you head into the bye week, clean up what you need to clean up, and then head over to, I think we play, Memphis in week 3 or is it SMU in week 3?
I thought it was Memphis.
I mean, yeah, you can double check that, but that's kind of mainly what I'm going to be looking for this team. That's all I want. I think it's honestly what all the fan base wants. And after what the showing you saw from Miami last week, I mean, not last week, yesterday, you kind of have to show that game is no longer going to be as much of a cakewalk as much as the fan base wants to believe.
Yeah, that's the team's job is not to make fans feel better. It's the fans feeling better is a collateral effect of the team succeeding, right? But I understand if Mike Norvell underestimated Georgia Tech a little and wanted to not put a ton of tape out there and save it for our more important games. I understand if that was the strategy. I don't agree with it, but I understand it if that was. To the extent there was any possibility of that happening in this game, that has to go the hell out the window. You have to go out and just play your game, run the plays you feel are right, regardless of what it puts on tape. You can't mess around in this game. Like, the spread is, I think it's 16.5 now. It was 17.5, opened at 20.5. I just don't understand who's making those numbers, because if you watch what happened to us last year and you watch what happened to get us against Boston College last year, last week I meant, for us.
It's been a long week.
It has been a long week. If you watch those things and you understand that they have a coach coming back who, again, I think if nothing else will instill discipline in that team, which means not many mistakes, you just wonder, like, how the hell are they coming up with that? Because this isn't a game that we should win by 20 points. We could. We're that much more talented than them, but there's a lot more things that need to get worked out before we're worried about how much we beat people by. Right this moment needs to be just beat them.
Yeah, folks, this pass rush last year, I think in 2 separate games, they had 2 against Louisville and 6 against Virginia, but then they only had a grand total of 5 against the rest of the teams on their schedule. So this is a BC team that, if they do somehow manage to get pressure to DJ, that will be a concern. But this is also an offensive line that BC has always had great offensive line play, so I'm not expecting us to have like a sack party, but I do expect better penetration than we saw against GT. But I definitely see this game as a dub for the Noles. Dave, before we go out, give me your final score prediction here.
28-25. Good
I
guys.
got 27-21. So I think we both got it. We're going to win the game. It's not going to be fun, but it's definitely going to, I think we're going to be at the end and we're going to grind it out, which we probably should have done against GT last week. But all we care about here, Dave, is a dub. Ain't that right? That's all we want.
Just eat the dub, please. God, I miss Jameis.
Oh. I know you do, but that's been years ago. But folks, thank you each and every single one of you for making us just listening, just hanging out, talking ball with us. Dave, please let the folks know how they can support us, help us out, and follow our work.
Yes, first of all, thank you for being here. Like Drake said, we appreciate each and every one of you who listens to the nonsense we have to say. But as always, please subscribe to the channel, like this video if you liked it. ding the little bell, turn your notifications on, tell us when the videos drop. And as always, leave us comments. Tell us why we're dumb. I love reading comments about why I'm dumb.
No, he doesn't. He'll call you idiots behind your back. But for Dave, this was Drake, and we'll see y'all next time on Noles Anonymous. Take care, everybody.
1-1.